Beyond self-negativity or feeling bad about yourself, what happens when you judge yourself? That's what this episode is about. You're listening to Pure Light, where we explore how you can believe in yourself and be happy with who you are so that you feel worthy of your craziest dreams and confident in your power to make them happen. My name is Eileen. I'm a coach, writer, and Kundalini Yoga and meditation teacher. This is episode 74. So in the last episode, I talked about where self-judgment comes from. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, in a nutshell, it comes from who you think you're supposed to be. It comes from comparing yourself to the ideal self that you have in your head. So in this episode, I want to talk about the implications of that. Self-negativity is the obvious one because it feels like you're not measuring up, but there's a lot more to it than that, and some of them are a bit subtler. So what happens when you judge yourself? A few things. When you judge yourself, you play by the rules in your head. So stuff like, you can't do this because, and then whatever, some reason. Or you can't do that because, and then some other reason. And the reasons point to you. So you talk yourself out of doing the things that you want. You talk yourself out of wanting the things that you want. You even talk yourself out of feeling the way that you feel because it doesn't align with who you think you're supposed to be. So all of this is based on who you think you're supposed to be. It's based on that ideal self. But when you play by those rules, you don't allow yourself to be all of who you are because you're limiting yourself based on whatever ideas you have about who you should be. So you end up shrinking into a lesser version of yourself because you're limiting yourself to those rules. So you might do things like say yes when you want to say no. You might force yourself to be nice when really you're angry and you're just trying to keep it in. Or you might say you're fine or okay when someone asks you how you're doing, even if that isn't true. Because you're trying to be who you think you should be, or who you think other people think you should be, instead of being honest about your experience. Like, for example, if you're working on a new project or starting a new job, and you have no idea what you're doing, and then your boss asks you, how are things going? You might say, they're going well, instead of being like, I'm not really sure what to do about this thing. And you would say that because you think you should know what you're doing, and because you think that they think you should know what you're doing, which may or may not be true. It's possible that they may think that, for sure. It's also possible that they may have given you something challenging to see how you would react. So there's potentially a whole other level of mental projections going on. So it isn't just about who you think you should be, but also who you think other people think you should be. So when you're trying to be who you think you should be or who you think someone else thinks you should be, you aren't being yourself. You're trying to change or fix yourself to conform to those expectations. So when you do that, when you show up in the world in that way, you constantly reinforce the belief that you should be different than you are because you're acting as if that's true. You're seeing yourself from that perspective. You're thinking that you should be a certain way, and you will end up acting and making decisions based on that, which will only serve to strengthen the belief that you should be different than you are. But you'll never be happy with who you are if you're trying to be who you think you should be, or if you're trying to be who you think other people think you should be. Like, you'll never be at peace with yourself. You can only be at peace with yourself when you're actually being yourself. So when you judge yourself, just to recap, you usually feel stuck and trapped because of all the rules in your head. And because of those, you lose your sense of freedom of choice. Like, you may not feel like you have a choice in certain things because you feel like you have to be a certain way. You end up talking yourself out of things like your feelings, your desires, even what you think, because it doesn't align with who you think you should be, which creates that sense of self-negativity and anger and frustration. And you often try to be who you think other people think you should be or who other people expect you to be. So you end up trying to change or fix yourself to conform to those expectations. And by doing that, you reinforce the belief that you should be different than you are, which perpetuates this entire cycle because it makes you feel like you're not enough. So now that we've covered where self-judgment comes from and why it's a problem, in the next episode, I'll talk about some strategies to stop doing that. So if you want to make sure you get that, subscribe to Pure Light wherever you listen to podcasts, Or you can also go to purelightpodcast.com to listen to all the episodes. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, may you be guided by your light.